Hello, everyone, and welcome to IDAGIO Live. My name is Michele Gamba, and I'm very happy to be joined by one of the most legendary conductors of our time, Sir Antonio Pappano. Ciao, Tony.
Ciao, Michele.
How are you?
Thank you.
Good. Well, the topic of today's conversation is actually the Roman trilogy. Of course, I mean, you're the music director of Covent Garden, but you're also the music director of the Santa Cecilia Orchestra in Rome, one of the most prestigious symphonic orchestras that we have. And it would be interesting to have a virtual trip around Rome with you and with Respighi.
These pieces were commissioned by my orchestra, the Orchestra of Santa Cecilia. And the first piece, Fontane Di Roma, the Fountains of Rome, were written in 1916, and they were supposed to be premiered by Toscanini, except that because there was Wagner in the first part and the audience was so incensed because this was wartime, and to hear German music in the first part, Toscanini abandoned the concert and the Respighi was not heard. So Guarnieri conducted the premiere of these pieces in 1917 in Rome. And this first piece, the Fontane, was not successful, actually. Okay. It has a melancholy air, at least to begin with, and the way it finishes. So it has a very, very quiet ending. Therefore, the sense of spectacle that is created by the other pieces, written quite a bit later, is not there, despite the wonder of the orchestration. This piece, Fontane, became then famous later when Toscanini did take it on in 1918, and he performed it in Milan and to great success, and that kind of launched Respighi. But if we talk about orchestration, I think it's very, very important to know that Respighi in 1900, believe it or not, took a position in St. Petersburg as the principal violist in the Russian Imperial Opera, and during their Italian season. And while he was there for 5 months, he studied with Rimsky-Korsakov. And that's the key, because Rimsky-Korsakov was a genius orchestrator, and also had an ear for color that was really second to none. And I think Respighi certainly was more than influenced. I think you could say that he stole certain ideas, maybe not from Rimsky-Korsakov himself, but from the Russian musical landscape. What do I mean by that? Well, if we hear the beginning of the Fontane, which is describing, as Respighi says, the fountain of the Valle Giulia at dawn. It depicts a pastoral landscape. Droves of cattle pass and disappear in the fresh, damp mists of a new Roman day. So it's dawn, and you hear this. This very, very hazy figure. Where does that come from? Well, people have said it comes from Mahler's Das Lied von der Erde, which you could say is true. This is Mahler. Etc. You get the idea. Or you could say, and I think it really comes from Mussorgsky, from Boris Godunov, the third scene. That's not important. The idea is that creating a stillness. The genius, I think, of Respighi is that he adds this very, very high note, which depicts the morning, that high tone that's sustained throughout, and these hazy harmonies, open fifths, which the Impressionists, of course, the French Impressionists would have been so amorous of, also the neoclassicists. But I mentioned the word pastoral before. And what makes this pastoral? Well, in the Roman countryside, well, any Italian countryside, you have the shepherd who plays the pipe and who will play what we call a stornello, a kind of, a rustic riff, I think is a good way of putting it. If I can introduce to you Professore Di Rosa, who is in the orchestra.
Ciao, Francesco.
Ciao. Ciao, Tony.
Play this. Would you play for us this first beautiful melody, this shepherd's song? Now, to the listeners, did you hear this melismatic figure, this quasi-oriental, which would be very typical of the southern Italian, or the southern part of Italy, shall we say. And then the playing about with major and minor. Extraordinary. It's just so, he's giving us touches of color to supplement this beautiful and simple and very common tune. Again, try to imagine that with the hazy harmonies that I spoke about and this continuous murmur all the way through. Now we are introduced to another tune. Again, playing with major and minor, or different colors in the modal scheme. Do you notice these melodies are short? They're very integral in themselves. If we hear something from Debussy, we will recognize the patterns. Which are integral in themselves. And they capture our attention, and they're usually repeated. So I've mentioned Russian music. I've mentioned the Italian, the southern Italian melismatic melody, but also we have this, the impressionistic, in particular Debussy. I've mentioned Mahler. All this in the first 10 bars. The oboe goes on to play, now instead of legato, goes on to play staccato. Listen to this next call. Gorgeous. You see how he lined up the staccato playing, and then inspired by the clarinet that preceded him, this melody that I played before, the oboe takes its own version of that. Again, this repeated figure, which I spoke before, is a very, very important feature of this. this is the general atmosphere of this piece. Now it will go into a major mode. Francesco, perhaps you can show us the second part. This together with cello is a different solo. Listen to this. Amazing, and you see how expansive it becomes and how far-reaching. There's an air of space around this number that is so important. Now, just as Francesco finished, on those notes, we have these chords. Listen carefully, and many of you will recognize. Of course, this is
Rose and Cavalier.
Rose and Cavalier. Of course, so we've introduced Strauss to the picture. It's not the same, but these little touches of color, he's painting. He's painting. This piece stays in this mood, and after a beautiful flute repetition of the opening melody, we're prepared for something completely different. And we move to the second movement, which is La Fontane del Tritone, the Triton, at dawn, and nel mattino, in the morning. And this is a wonderful fountain in Rome. It's
Piazza Barberini. Piazza Barberini.
Yes, and it's important to mention that these pieces are just not about the fountains, but they're about the fountains in a particular light, in a particular time of day. We've mentioned dawn. Now it's the morning, and the Triton is holding the shell, the conch, and blowing, and so we have the horns. And they repeat it. It's an amazing figure, answered by, now we introduce the piano. Again, color, painting. So they're calling the naiads and the tritons, and what will develop a huge splash of water in sound is incredibly successful, helped by the use of the triangle and the cymbals in a trill. It's just amazing. You get this amazing wash of sound. It's not so much the notes or the harmonies that are important, but the orchestral effects here. Poco a poco, little by little, the music will become important, the music itself. And the music transforms into a dance of the naiads. In the true tempo, it says leggero scherzando. So and now we have almost a Mendelssohnian leggerezza, lightness, and the whole orchestra is playing on their toes. There are no double basses, no bass instruments to be had whatsoever, and it's just fantastic how he's orchestrated. The use of the celeste is important, the keyboard instrument, answered by the pianos and the harps. Again, musical gesture, more important than anything else. That piece will terminate and die down in volume, and something incredible happens. If we go to the Fontana di Trevi al Meriggio, this is the Trevi fountain, perhaps the most famous of these four that we meet in these pieces. And we see there the Neptune being pulled on a chariot by the horses.
Very
And
majestic.
it's just amazing. But the feeling that he's coming out of the water, rising out of the water. Well, how does Respighi create this? He has this undulating figure in the cello. And this melody. Already hear it coming out. Orchestra explodes. I wish I could do that better for you on the piano, but it's you really see it before you when you hear it. This rising out of the water and this majestic mythological god coming out of the water. It's just absolutely fantastic. Of course, we only get to see this in Rome with so many tourists around. We can't enjoy it alone. Maybe nowadays, during this time of lockdown, we can see it. But now is the moment where, of course, the brass really comes into its own. I'd like to invite Professore Conti, Andrea Conti, the first trombone of the Orchestra of Santa Cecilia.
Buonasera,
to,
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Hello, Andrea. Buonasera.
Buonasera.
Andrea, can you give us an idea of this quite unusual writing for the trombones? It's very vivid and very quite quick, but always rising up as Neptune does out of the water.
Yes, it's a very challenging passage, especially for the low brass. I mean, the bass trombone and the tuba in this moment are playing one of the hardest passages in the repertoire. So I will try to play like the thema, the motive in this place.
It's amazing. Did you hear that? Da-dum, da-dum. Has a tremendous feeling of calling and
Wagnerian.
pardon?
Wagnerian in a way.
Yeah, but Wagnerian. Can you imagine the whole trombone section aided by the trumpets and incredible flourishes from the woodwinds, the strings, and the piano going crazy and surrounding that melody. This now builds up to an amazing climax. Andrea, did you want to play something else from that initial part?
No, not from the initial. I thought to play the passage on the Largamente.
Perfect. This builds up to a huge climax, this music, even with the addition of the organ, believe it or not. This unexpected chord.
Amazing. Great.
It's not often you get to play trumpet and trombone and piano together. That's
Live.
But this climax is one of the great things, and I say it is so massive. Again, you hear what you actually see the waves when you hear this music, and you hear this majestic call of Neptune. One of the most challenging things is to actually transition down into the extremely melancholic and calm music of the finale, which is the Fontane di Villa Medici al tramonto. There's the fountain of the Villa Medici at sunset. And so it's a long, and you said the word Wagnerian before, but this Wagnerian tradition is for real, to get softer, but incrementally, gradually, and slower, building, and through the use of very, very, very subtle mechanisms. You have this chord, then it moves to the minor, stays there for a while, and then settles on E major. We hear the harps tinkling. We hear Neptune's call. And then we hear the tinkling of the celeste. Again, returning to a tune, this time not rustic at all, but extremely sensual. We're at sunset now. We're looking over the Piazza del Popolo, and the sunset, the light there, you can just imagine, if you've been there, and if you've been to Rome and you've seen this melody, again playing with the major and, well, different harmonies based on chromatic harmony. Again, very, very simple with these riffs that are used as accompaniments. Again, a very, very impressionistic, painterly method of composing. I mentioned Rimsky-Korsakov, I mentioned color before. These are really, really essential elements. This piece is perhaps the most challenging because the orchestra feels almost naked. The sensitivity of the moment is leads us to the most melancholy and refined, I would say, melody for the solo violin. Again, you have this constant accompaniment with little glissandi in the harps. You have this cello answers. Then we get all kinds of colors into more sensual, Scriabinesque musical language.
Well,
we have a whole section where we hear birdsong. Doesn't sound so good on the piano, and against very, very simple harmonies, again, creating a mood of contemplation, even sadness, I would say. The fiddles then take this theme that I played before, but with like a ticking of a clock. Maybe the Marschallin's clock.
Amazing, yeah.
Which is very, very beautiful. We hear then, again, we are in Rome, we have to hear bells.
Bells, of course.
Hear Angelus. played on a note that doesn't really have much to do with the harmonies around it. Flute plays. Speeding that up now. Almost Puccini-esque chords of pain. While the Angelus, almost Suor Angelica here.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is the most extraordinary moment is here. Will he resolve? Will he resolve at how? But listen. The bell's still there. The Angelus is still playing. And he finally resolves. Disappears really. You need to hold it as long as possible. Really extraordinary moments. Michele, do you hear the range of dynamics is quite something. The orchestra needs to be able to play the quietest pianissimo and the most enormous fortissimo.
And it needs, you need the transparency to achieve that, I presume, right? In order to be clear with the layers, different layers that actually are so, I mean, they merge together in order to hear the fine line of the oboe, for example, right?
Well, you know, we're very, very lucky to be able to bring these pieces on tour. We've played them a lot. We've recorded them, obviously. And we will know these pieces so well, you know, and I think the transparency comes from that too, how we work on them, the kind of respect that we give them, the amount of time that we spend on actually getting every nuance, every detail out, so the listener can really see, hear them. I always refer to the eyes, but I think that's important.
Absolutely. Well, we are all very much looking forward to coming back to Rome and hear it live. And now we're gonna get a recording of Santa Cecilia, of course, which is incredible. And well, thank you, Tony, and thank you, your colleagues in Rome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Francesco. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Michele.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you next time with Pini, hopefully.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Grazie.
Bye-bye.